Greetings, everyone. Many couples see withdrawal pulling the penis out of the vagina before ejaculation as a simple form of birth control. It requires no preparation, costs nothing, and involves no medication as long as the man pulls out before ejaculating. It may seem as though the problem has been solved. But that very simplicity can make people underestimate the risks. Withdrawal is not a highly reliable method of contraception. It does not protect against sexually transmitted infections. And when it becomes a routine method used during most sexual encounters, it can also place psychological pressure on both partners. For some men, the constant pressure to stay in control, judge the timing perfectly, and worry about not pulling out in time can make sexual responses feel less natural. Over time, this may contribute to loss of arousal, difficulty maintaining an erection, or problems with ejaculation. It is important to be clear that modern medicine does not consider withdrawal to be a direct or inevitable cause of impotence. However, relying on it too heavily may create a chain of problems involving contraception, psychological stress, and the overall quality of a couple's sex life. When these factors persist over time, that is where the real concern lies. During sex, the male body does much more than simply become erect and then ejaculate. The entire process involves the brain, nervous system, blood vessels, hormones, emotions, and many muscle groups. As stimulation increases, the heart rate rises, the penis fills with blood, and the body moves closer to orgasm. At this stage, attention is usually focused strongly on physical sensations and on one's partner. But if a man has to keep reminding himself, "Am I close yet? Will I pull out in time? What if I ejaculate inside?" The experience can easily shift from enjoyment to constant self-monitoring. This is the first major disadvantage of frequently relying on withdrawal. Sexual response requires a balance between stimulation and relaxation. The more anxious a person becomes about performance, the more difficult it can be for the body to respond naturally. A few occasions may not cause any problem, but if every sexual encounter involves intense concentration on the exact moment to withdraw, a man may gradually develop a conditioned response. As orgasm approaches, he must become alert, stop, and pull away. Over time, some men may lose their erection while still aroused, struggle to regain the feeling, or focus almost entirely on control instead of connecting with their partner. Performance anxiety and psychological pressure are already known to worsen erectile difficulties in some men. Some men take a different approach. Instead of simply withdrawing at the right moment, they try to hold back or suppress ejaculation in order to prolong sex or avoid pregnancy. Two different situations need to be distinguished here. Deliberately slowing down, pausing stimulation, or changing position so that both partners can stay in sync are normal sexual techniques. When done comfortably, without pain and without psychological pressure, these behaviors are not inherently harmful. The problem arises when someone repeatedly forces himself to suppress ejaculation while extremely tense and treats this as the main method of contraception when the body is already very close to orgasm. Abruptly stopping stimulation can sometimes produce a temporary sense of frustration, pressure, heaviness, or discomfort in the genital or pelvic area. In most cases, these sensations resolve on their own. But if every sexual encounter repeatedly involves stopping suddenly at the peak of arousal, sex may gradually become associated with tension rather than relaxation. Even more important, are the psychological consequences. If one partner is constantly afraid of an unintended pregnancy, while the other is constantly wondering whether withdrawal will happen in time, it becomes difficult for either person to focus completely on the emotional and intimate experience. Over time, intimacy may gradually decline. For women, withdrawal can also interrupt the process of reaching orgasm. In some cases, a woman may still be becoming more aroused when the man suddenly has to stop and pull out because he has reached the point of ejaculation. If this happens repeatedly, the woman may begin to feel that sex always ends according to the man's timing. Not every woman needs to reach orgasm during every sexual encounter, and sexual satisfaction cannot be measured by a single formula. However, if one partner is repeatedly left unsatisfied and the couple does not communicate about it, frustration can accumulate. This may gradually reduce sexual desire, lead to avoidance of intimacy, or create emotional distance in the relationship. Another major disadvantage is the risk of unintended pregnancy. Withdrawal depends almost entirely on the man's ability to recognize when ejaculation is about to occur and to pull out at exactly the right moment. In real life, human beings are not machines capable of repeating the same action with perfect precision every time, being only a few seconds late. Losing control during intense arousal or allowing semen to come into contact with the female genital area can create a risk of pregnancy. Therefore, if a couple genuinely does not want to have a child yet, relying only on withdrawal can create an unnecessary psychological burden. The anxiety after every sexual encounter, waiting for the next period, buying a pregnancy test, and wondering, did he pull out in time that time, can affect future sexual experiences as well. When an experience that should promote intimacy becomes repeatedly associated with fear of pregnancy, the brain may begin to connect sex with stress. At that point, both sexual desire and the ability to respond sexually may be affected. It is also important to remember that withdrawal does not protect against sexually transmitted infections. In relationships where there is a risk of infection, pulling out before ejaculation cannot replace the protective role of condoms. So, is occasional withdrawal dangerous? If a couple occasionally uses withdrawal in a situation where no other contraceptive method is available, that does not mean the body will immediately be harmed or that the man will suddenly develop sexual dysfunction. The greater concern is turning it into a long-term habit, especially when neither partner actually feels comfortable relying on it. Similarly, it is not unusual for a man to occasionally control the timing of ejaculation in order to give his partner more time to become highly aroused. Many people can temporarily reduce stimulation, pause briefly, and then continue. That is simply a way of adjusting the pace of sexual activity. It is very different from continuously forcing the body not to ejaculate because of fear of pregnancy. In other words, extending sex by managing the rhythm and repeatedly suppressing ejaculation because of contraceptive anxiety are two very different experiences. One can take place in a relaxed and intentional state. The other can easily turn into psychological pressure. And it is that pressure that deserves attention. If, after relying on withdrawal for a long time, you frequently lose your erection, have difficulty reaching orgasm, struggle to ejaculate, or experience excessive anxiety about pregnancy, do not immediately assume that your body is damaged. These symptoms may be related to stress, lack of sleep, alcohol use, medications, metabolic conditions, or sexual anxiety. This is also a good time to reconsider both your contraceptive method and your sexual habits. A good contraceptive method should not turn every sexual encounter into a test of the man's reflexes. Responsibility for preventing pregnancy should not depend on a decision made within a few seconds before ejaculation. Couple can consider condoms, birth control pills, intrauterine devices, contraceptive implants, or other suitable methods. Condoms also have the advantage of reducing the risk of many sexually transmitted infections when used correctly. The final thing to remember is that the quality of sex is not determined only by how long intercourse lasts or by how good a man is at holding back. A satisfying sexual experience requires a sense of safety, trust, communication, and the ability for both partners to focus on each other. If every intimate moment comes with a command repeating in the mind, do not ejaculate inside under any circumstances, it becomes very difficult for the body to relax completely. When that tension continues for a long time, it may gradually interfere with sexual desire, erections, the ability to reach orgasm, and the satisfaction of both partners. That is the real reason why frequent reliance on withdrawal should not be taken lightly. It may not immediately cause a specific disease, nor does using withdrawal automatically mean that a man will become impotent, but repeatedly placing the body in a state of simultaneous arousal and vigilance, repeatedly interrupting sex at the moment of climax, and repeatedly living with the fear that contraception may fail is clearly not an ideal way to maintain a healthy long-term sex life. Withdrawal may serve as a temporary solution in certain circumstances, but it should not be considered an ideal method for long-term use. The price of convenience may include contraceptive failure, prolonged anxiety, loss of spontaneity during sex, and sexual function difficulties in some people. If the goal is both to prevent pregnancy and to maintain a comfortable, stable sex life, do not turn intimacy into a race against the moment of ejaculation. A more proactive, suitable, and reliable contraceptive method will usually be better for physical health, psychological well-being, and the relationship itself. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Mia, and that concludes today's discussion. Goodbye, and I'll see you again next time.